All right. Good evening, everyone. I'm the host this evening. My name is Kymone Hinds. I live in Memphis, Tennessee. And this evening, we're discussing the topic of the origin of humanity and really the origin of our world and kind of answering the question as to where we come from and how did we get here. This is a part of a series and a movement that really we've been doing here in Memphis, and it's called Good God for Real. And it's really a question. It's not a statement as an exclamation, Good God for real, but it's more a question, Good God for real. And a part of this is asking the question, is God good? If we do believe in him based on what we see manifested in the world, based on what we see happening, is God good? And the second part of this is God real? For some people, we question, is there such a thing as God? And who is he? And based on all the maze of religion and different belief systems, can he even be found? And so our first thing that we did is we went out to the city of Memphis, asked people in the street questions that they had for God and questions they had about God. And we compiled it on a video, and you can check it out on our website, goodgodforreal.com, and it's the number 4. And today we're dealing with the first group of questions, and it's the questions of origin. And people are asking the question, how do we get here? How did humanity get here, and how did we all come to be? So I'm glad to have as my guest this evening, Miss Claudia Allen. I'm going to allow her an opportunity to introduce herself. And soon we should be also joined by another guest. But for right now, we have Miss Claudia Allen. Welcome. Thank you for being on.
Thank you. No, I appreciate you inviting me to the conversation.
Yeah, I think we lost a little bit of what you were saying, but can you say that again?
Oh, man. I just said hello. Thank you for inviting me to the conversation. I don't know why this is, I'm on my 5G, so I don't know why
Okay.
this is.
Okay. All right. Well, let me ask you a little bit about yourself. Tell me, where are you now? What are you doing? What discipline are you studying? Just kind of share with everyone what's happening with you, and where are you?
Okay. Well, currently I'm a first year doctoral student at the University of Maryland in the Department of English, specializing in 19th and 20th century African American literature. And I guess my research in particular is invested in the role of theology within African American lit. So I'm particularly interested in questions like who is God, what is God, how does God operate within Black literature, particularly Black women's lit.
Okay. Now, I need to give probably people watching would probably ask this question. I am sweating because here in Memphis, we just switched from kind of being cold to now being warm. And we still have the heat on. And I'm trying to get someone in my house to come put on the air. So for everyone, this is hilarious. But yeah, this is the benefit of live shows. Man, I am not nervous. I am just sweating because it is hot. So let's go with this. Let me ask you a little bit about your background and education in issues of origin. Kind of tell me, like, where did you get your understanding and viewpoint on issues of origin? Like, where did that come from?
So I will say that I am a practicing Seventh-day Adventist Christian. I was born into this particular faith. And so because of that, I've been in Adventist education, K through undergrad. So I would credit Adventist education as well as, church, Sabbath school, and the like to my views on origins and creation. I've always I was only exposed to a particular creation narrative for a significant period of my life. And so then I think as I got into high school, in academy and college, that's when the potential for evolution was presented, but it was not presented in great detail. It was always presented in comparison, like, hey, this is what some people think, but at the end of the day, this is what we believe type situation. And so
Okay.
I'm not in the sciences. I am definitely in the humanities. And so I am not trained in the science and the quantum mechanics and quantum physics behind origins. But within the humanities, I've read a number of origin narratives, whether those be from other cultures, particularly non-Western, non-European cultures, that speak to what they believe is or was the initiation of the world. And so that's kind of where I think my ideas have kind of continued to be shaped and molded. Just now in this doctoral program, having more access to non-Western articles of literature that speak to potential creation narratives that are not the Bible.
Okay. All right. It looks like Miss Courtney Ray is joining us. I can see her. I can see
you can
that she's.
hear me.
I
Can
can't.
you hear me?
I can hear you, but I can't see your pictures. I don't know if your camera's on. Yeah, we're getting a black screen when you talk.
Okay.
Yeah, we're almost there. If you have a camera, if you could enable it.
Let's see.
Looks like
If I
we're
know
getting.
how to.
Yeah. The camera thing might be up at the top if you. Yeah, and you might want to use some headphones too. All right.
Can you see me now?
No, not yet.
All right. I don't know.
Okay.
I'm messing with it, trying to figure it out.
Okay. Do you mind talking while you mess with it so that we could kind of get you
Sure.
in the dialogue? Okay.
Yeah.
Courtney Ray is our second guest tonight on our discussion of origin. And the question I want to ask you, Courtney, just kind of tell us a little bit about your background, kind of what your journey of studies and exposure has been.
Well, I am a pastor. I've been pastoring since 2003. I graduated from Andrews University Seminary, and basically most of my background in terms of a scholastic or academic study of these kinds of issues has been from a Christian perspective. And right now, most recently, I'm in a PhD program for neuroscience and neuropsych. And we also kind of look at different perspectives in terms of creation narrative and understanding how our role in the world is basically able to be seen in historical narratives and also in just scientifically looking at what biology tells us about how we have come to be here.
Okay.
So it's very interesting to see different perspectives from different angles, and depending on which circles you're in, which narrative prevails. So.
Okay. Okay. Well, I asked Claudia earlier, so I want to ask you the same question. Tell me a little bit about your education in issues of origin. Kind of like what kind of shaped your view on the issue of on the issue of origin of humanity in our world.
Well, I think that, number one, like I said, I did theology, and that was what my undergrad degree is in. and being able to kind of look at not only the Bible, but also a lot of the Near Eastern philosophies of origins, and then juxtaposing that against scientific origins that have been in my academic training as well, kind of have shaped some ideas of what I have about where we come from. But I think that for me, the thing that has most impacted me is the Bible and the Christian worldview, because
Okay.
even as I look in a lot of the science literature, I still see a lot that can be explained by intelligent design, and I think that intelligent design is definitely part of what I can definitively say evidence has led me towards. So.
Okay. Well, let me say to those who may be viewing, if you have a question, we want you to ask that question by going to our Facebook page. That's Good God, the number 4 real, and writing a question there, or you can submit that question via Twitter. The Twitter handle is Good God, number 4 real 901. The Twitter handle, Good God, the number 4 real 901. So we're looking for questions, and while people are um, asking or submitting questions, or you can even submit it in the chat section of this YouTube channel, this Google Hangout. You can submit your questions there. All right, so both of you kind of shared where your background is in terms of your learning. So I guess I want to ask you a foundational question based on that is, what is your view of the origin of humanity? How do we get here? Yes, your answer. And either one of you can start first.
I guess short answer is I believe that God created the universe, and that He created the matter, the energy, the space necessary to house life, and that life is then created, formed, and He breathed breath into it, and that's how we have come to be.
Okay. All right. Pretty simple, pretty succinct. Okay, and I'm sure we'll be dealing with varying views. So those of you who may be thinking differently, don't tune out yet. We want to actually engage in a dialogue. Courtney Ray, can you also share the same answer? What is your view on the origin of humanity?
I think very similarly, I think that we are results of intelligent design, and specifically my personal belief is that intelligent design is a creator God who has been able to give us life and intelligence in the fact that we are made in God's image. So that's kind of my perspective and my worldview. I also believe that as things I know that when we talk about evolution, a lot of people think that you either believe in evolution or that everything on Earth has been made in its current form. And I guess people don't understand that there's also a place where you can believe in microevolution. That is adaptation. And so I definitely believe that there's a place for adaptation when we look at just the changing of forms over time of different species of animals and plants that have developed over time. And
Okay.
so I definitely believe that the origin of all life is from God.
Okay. So you kind of brought up an interesting point, because in our discussions about origin, usually it's pitted as a discussion of faith versus science, or creationism versus science. I want you to kind of help me. What are your thoughts on the the intersection, or even is it a clash between faith and science? How do they connect with each other? And maybe I'll let you go first, Claudia. Courtney, while you keep trying to get us some camera feed so we can see what you look like.
All right.
I guess I would say that, and I think you guys kind of touched on this too in your presentation on Sabbath, but just the notion of faith occupying or existing within multiple fields of thought and study. And so I don't come from the school of thought that faith and science are in competition or at odds with one another, but rather that scientists also operate under a mode of faith. And so they also believe in things that they cannot see at some level. They do believe in things that cannot as easily or readily be proven with physical evidence. And so I think because of that, there is an element of faith needed in order to believe in science. But at the same time, I also believe that that enhances science, because I think that science can really get into some awesome questions when they really study down the particles and the protons and the neutrons, and just really the intricacies of how natural laws occur and function within the world. And so when you have an understanding of that, I think faith in and of itself just really bolsters that inquiry, and just really only supports what it is that you're really trying to find in terms of answers about the origin of life.
Okay, all right. Those of you who are watching, we want your questions, so please make sure you can tweet us or put it on our Facebook page. The Twitter handle is GoodGod4Real901. That's a Twitter handle, GoodGod4Real901. And Facebook is Good God for Real. You can spell it out. All right, Courtney, what is the intersection or the connection between faith and science for you, or what in your view?
Well, you know, it's interesting. A lot of people like to act as if they have to be opposing. And really, the whole idea that faith and science are at odds with each other is a really recent phenomenon. Most of the scientists who you know, names that people study in history and science history, have been people of faith. So it's interesting that it's only been kind of a modern thing where we've seen people feel like, oh, you have to either be a scientist or a person of faith, where, you know, Einstein, Newton, Copernicus, all these people who made these great discoveries that we still use, and theories that we still use even today, have been people who believed in God and had a very strong faith in God. And so I think that even right now, when we're talking about faith and scientific viewpoints, you can't have extremes just like any place else. And I think that the idea that faith and science are opposed to each other is kind of is sort of reflective of just how our modern day positions on things are, where we feel like everything either has to be either black or white, left or right. Everything has to be dichotomous, and we don't see that there is an in-between. So there are people who are extremists, who are extreme fundamentalists, who deny science, say that, you know, nothing can be scientifically explained, and they distrust scientific research, and they don't, you know, believe in anything. And then there are the people who are hardcore scientists and who say that everything can be explained by just what we know, and there's nothing supernatural or divine. But I think that in the middle, there are lots of people who occupy that space, lots of scientists who occupy that space, that says that science is an explanation of what God has done, and that God set laws in motion that the universe is governed by, and we're able to see God's hand in many of the things that we learn when we study about biology, and we're able to see God at work in creation.
Okay. Well, both of you are in fields of. Oh, go ahead, Claudia. You were saying something.
Oh, no, I guess I just appreciated what Courtney was saying, and what was just kind of coming to my mind as she was speaking was just also the fact that, you know, in the 17th century, you know, the church was also not in favor of scientific discovery and exploration. So I think that's also part of the tension that we have come to know concerning faith and science. Just because the church was very adamant about saying, you know, God did it, and so we don't have to talk about it.
Okay.
Whereas certain scientists were like, hey, like, I believe in God. I'm with you, like I'm saying. But there are just some intricacies and some nuances and some things that are just really interesting me that I just really want to learn more about. I'm not discounting the existence of God, but I'm just trying to understand at a greater level the system and structure that He has placed in motion.
Okay. Well, it's interesting you say that. Um, so one of the things that I'm curious of, both of you are in institutions. All right, Pastor Courtney.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think we're getting feedback maybe from your line. Do you have a headphone you can put in? Because we're getting it coming back through.
Oh, sorry. I can mute it, but I don't
Oh,
have headphones.
okay. All right, we'll probably have to play with that mute and unmuting. So what I was saying is, both of you are at institutions of higher learning. You're at, I think it's Georgetown University, Claudia?
I graduated from Georgetown. I'm at University of Maryland now.
Okay, and Courtney, you're in a PhD program? Sorry, you're on mute, so yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I'm
at being in those places, have you encountered sort of a skepticism against the simplistic view that you might hold that you articulated earlier? And what are some of the objections you might have heard you might have heard it in school, but even from others, what are some of the objections you might have heard to your view of the origin of humanity?
Well, I think that, like I said, it's very interesting. There are a lot of scientists that I know of, researchers that I know of, who really have a high regard for faith, and a lot of them embrace faith in their own personal life and their own understanding of origins. So it's not as much animosity as you would think, but I have encountered some people who say, oh, we're just souped up monkey brains, and when you look at our brains parsed out, you just see that our neocortex is just another level from the reptilian brain, and so we're not really that much different. So there are people who hold that view, but I will also say that most of the researchers that I've come across, even if they might not share the view of creationism or faith, they still respect it.
Okay.
And in the scientific community, there's not really that much not as much animosity as you would think if you were like just reading comment sections on articles and things like that.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
How about you, Claudia? Have you encountered any?
I have to agree with Courtney. I think that, even getting my master's at Georgetown, now doing this doctorate at UMD, I've not really experienced people outright try to attack me for believing in Christianity. I have had people maybe make like comments or like jokes or try to make light of someone's belief in God. For example, last semester I was in an early American lit course, and when you study early 19th century American literature, you get into a lot of Puritanism, you get into a lot of Native American literatures, and that's actually where I came in contact with a Native American piece on creation and origins. And so when you deal with that kind of literature, you are bound to get into conversations of, well, I believe, this is within the literature, the characters are saying, I believe in God so much so that I believe in modesty, and I believe in a kind of a moral code, and I believe in a responsibility to my brother, and these kinds of conversations. And so there have been a couple comments, in discussion where someone might say, oh, they're crazy to believe that, or something like that, just like a little joke. But I've never received direct animosity, and no one has ever treated me less than or anything like that, because I do believe in the Bible and the things of the Word. So.
Okay. So I'm curious now. We've talked about establishing that you both believe in intelligent design, and you've gone beyond intelligent design to stating that you believe in the Judeo-Christian biblical narrative of creation. Um, and being people that you're studying in the humanities, I know Courtney, you studied in sciences, and you were even doing some work in biology and stuff. But with that, there are some questions that science raises that it seems to be difficult for the creation narrative to answer. And some of those questions may concern the old age of the world. It seems to be some carbon dating that dates back a lot longer than the creation narrative would have us believe. So how do you answer some of the criticism or some of the challenges to the simple creation narrative that we find in the Bible with what science seems to have suggested?
Courtney, you want to go first? I think she's on. Okay.
Let me, hold on. Courtney, you might need to unmute yourself. Let me see.
Okay.
All right, go ahead, go first here.
So pretty much, I guess what I would say is, I think that studying, I'm trying to figure out how to word this. So when we study literature, a lot of what we study is the politics behind literature. You know, why is something written? Why does something get published? And so when you really think about whether these be Christian ideas or whether these be Native American ideas, a lot of Native American writings, early Native American writings, are written by people of Native American background that converted to Christianity.
Okay.
So even, for example, the Iroquois creation narrative was written by a gentleman who was a part of a Native American community and said, I'm going to now be Christian. And so when you read that narrative, it is definitely a part of or from, I would say, oral tradition within the Native American culture, but at the same time, it definitely harps upon the biblical creation narrative. There are a lot of similarities, even though there are a lot of differences. And so what I have noticed just in studying literature is that even through oral traditions and the writing and rewriting of origin narratives, there is a connection or a similarity to Christianity. And so at some level, that has strengthened my belief in the Bible, because it says to me that Christianity has, you know, influenced so many different cultures, and it was able to be accepted by so many different cultures because the narratives of the Bible were similar to the narratives that were a part of their culture, their oral tradition narratives. So, for instance, the Iroquois Indians were able to receive the biblical narrative of creation because it had similar plot lines and storylines to their oral tradition.
Okay.
But at the same time, I think that that is also a problem for me, because when you also get into some of the oppression and the politics that Christianity has used to impose its ideas on peoples, it also makes me wonder, is the Judeo-Christian, is the biblical creation narrative really that sacred text, and over maybe like a Native American creation narrative, because God really did inspire scripture, right? Like he tells us. Or is it because Christianity has had a history of colonialization and imperialism and violently forcing its ideas on other peoples, right? And so I think that that's one of the tensions that I experience when I think about creation narratives and my belief in origins and stuff like that. But I think I also always come back to, because I always find some kind of origin narrative, some kind of oral tradition that just really harps back to the crux of the biblical narrative, without the oppression of Christianity. And so that always has me say, man, okay, you know what? There seems to be a thread of belief that there is one God that created the world, and that life then came based on that initiation. Whatever human variations we might add to the narrative, that's still the crux of the matter. God pushed start. And I think that's one of the things that I always thought was interesting.
You're bringing up something that I want to delve into a little bit deeper, because you're right. I think if we can establish, if we can, and one of the things I'm clear on here, we're not going to answer everyone's question or deal with every objection, but I think we want to present a credible argument. So I think we've kind of talked about intelligent design and the fact that that is not against science. The science is not opposed to intelligent design. And then in establishing the creation narrative, there may be some questions that science seems to ask that people don't know how to answer. And then I want to come back to, okay, if we establish a intelligent designer, how do we choose which one of the narratives we want to say is the one that we're going to go with? So, Courtney, if you could unmute yourself, I want to ask you the same question. The challenges that science seems to suggest on along, carbon dating and an old age Earth and that kind of stuff. How do you answer that based on the simple biblical narrative of creation and the story of humanity? How do you answer those questions?
Well, there are a couple of things that I would want to say. First of all, when we're talking about carbon dating and when we talk about some of the techniques that geologists use, some of those things, I think it would be disingenuous for us to act as if those things are perfect or exact. Okay. And I know that if you have archaeologists or geologists who are on the on the video feed watching, they might say, hey, well, it is a science, and it is. But all science, as you get to know more and more, you kind of see those things that are flawed in your design. And I think that even things that we thought 20 or 30 years ago were ways that we can figure out things very precisely, those techniques we found flaws in. And so I think that one of the things about when we have advances in science and we say, oh, definitively we see this thing proves this, there's always a grain of salt with that, where we need to say, well, are we looking at all of the possible explanations? Is everything that we're putting all our eggs in this basket, do they all line up? And one of the things you know about carbon dating is that various things can affect the way that whether or not carbon dating can be accurate. So, for instance, if something is touched by fire, for instance, we know that carbon dating at that point becomes inaccurate because the carbon that is emitted or that's deposited because of that damage will give you false readings. And you
can I pause you for a second? Because I asked you a question and I use a technical term that some may not know. So just as you're answering, can you explain what carbon dating is? I know I didn't, but would you mind doing
it? So carbon dating is when all elements have a half-life. And so that means that if you have a certain amount of an element, there is a lifespan to that where it'll decay. And so the half-life is the amount of time it will take for that element to decay to the point where there's only half of what you started with. Okay. And so carbon dating is such that you will look at a certain amount of carbon in a section, and you would say, well, based on the amount that we see here, there must have been X amount of half-lives, or there must have been this amount of time that has passed. But we know that various things happen, such as fire or different other disasters that contaminate those areas that we might be observing or looking at. Carbon dating becomes less accurate. And so sometimes the techniques that we have are not as definitive as we would like them to be. And even though we have used the tools that are the most accurate for what we have, there are always flaws in design. There are always things that could be explained by other ways. And so I think that just because people are saying, well, you know, you look at the geological column, is that the only way that you can explain the fact that you see certain layers of sediment in a certain pattern? Is that the only explanation? Could it also be explained by a flood? Could it also be explained by other things like that? And so there's always that possibility that the scientific techniques that we are using aren't the most accurate to give you a definitive answer. But on the flip side of that, going back to the Bible and the creation story, the other part of it is that the Bible itself was never meant to be a science textbook. And I think that's also important for people to remember, because sometimes people are like, aha, you see, the Bible said that it happened in XYZ. Like, people will use the story where Joshua is fighting against in the war with the Israelites, and he commands the sun to stand still, and people are like, oh, we know that the sun doesn't move across the sky, but instead the earth revolves around the sun. You see, the Bible is inaccurate. And the fact of the matter is that was written to a specific people group at a specific time, and that narrative was meant to convey what happened in that battle. Was it meant to convey how the earth revolves around the sun and the movement of the solar system? No, it's not. And so sometimes we take things that were not meant for a scientific purpose and try to apply that in ways that we want to say, yes, this explains how these things happen, or no, these things are not explained how this happened. And one of the examples that I think is really interesting for us to really examine is the Bible creation story itself, because it begins by saying, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. And so in that first passage of Genesis, we have the story of the creation of the heavens and the earth. So basically the earth and our atmosphere. But it's not the creation story for the entire universe. Wow. So it could be, the Bible never says, the Bible is very silent on whether or not God created out of nothing. What in Hebrew that term is ex nihilo. Did God create out of absolutely nothing, or did God start with some material that he formed into the earth and into what we have now? And so sometimes we look to the Bible for scientific answers and saying, yes, the Bible is telling us that it happened exactly this way, when the Bible was never meant to be used in that way.
Yeah. And just thinking about in studying literature too, like what we see is that literature is more so an evidence of what people thought at that time period. So even Courtney's example of the narrative of Joshua is an excellent example as to why faith and science are not in competition or in opposition based on this particular narrative, because at the end of the day, what this is showing us is humanity's understanding of science at that time. Wow. And so they're literally trying to articulate what they see is a supernatural or an unnatural experience that they had in battle, and because they don't necessarily have the scientific knowledge to prove or understand that completely, they articulated it the best way that they could. So I really appreciate it. And I really liked, where she went to with just this notion of the potential that God did not create ex nihilo. I never thought about that, because at the end of the day, that genuinely is not within the narrative.
Yeah. You know what's interesting, and I'm really glad that you are bringing these things out, both Claudia and Courtney. There are a few things I want to just recap. I like recapping stuff. One of the things that is being said is that science and faith and science and the narrative are not at odds. And there's some things that science does not take into account when it looks at the decay and the carbon dating. And one of those is the flood. And the biblical narrative of the flood is a much more widespread than we would look at in our floods that we have today. So that would definitely affect the decay and the layers of the layers that we have in our earth here. So that's one. But I think also this big point that you made, Courtney, which is the Bible is not meant to be a science textbook, and there's some areas that we have I've gone to answer questions that the Bible didn't mean to answer. So I appreciate both of you sharing on that. I appreciate your point on that, Claudia. Anything else you want to add on this before we kind of just dive into another area? But I appreciate that.
Yeah, I think, just to that idea that, oh man, I hear an echo. Okay. Just to that idea, I think the point of the Bible as a text is to come to an understanding of who God is and how God operates within the lives of humanity through the lens and understanding of human writers. And so, to Courtney's point, you cannot critique the Bible for its inability to explain scientific fact when it is not written to explain scientific fact.
Okay.
It is written to explain my idea or my belief of who God is.
Okay.
That's the only point that it's supposed to prove.
Okay. All right. Well, it kind of leads me to another question then. What are some challenges that you might have then still in your own mind? Because one of the things that I wanted to be clear in this whole series, Good God for Real, is that faith and doubt both go hand in hand. That faith isn't the absence of doubt. So there may be still questions that you may be wrestling with on the whole origin of the earth and humanity. What, if you have any that you might be wrestling with, share them, because maybe it may resonate with someone out there. If not, that's fine.
I mean, I think it'd be disingenuous to say that, oh yeah, I totally have everything figured out about how God created everything, and I totally get how this world is created. And I think that even science, that when we look at different avenues of science and chemistry and physics and biology, even as much as we have learned as a species and learning about our world, there are still things that are so incomplete that we don't know, and even questions that we don't know to ask because we're so limited by what we have in front of us. And so there's such a broad scope in the universe that we have no idea how that works. And similarly in theology, I think that there's such a vast array of things that I don't even know the questions that I need to be asking because they're so beyond what I know already. I think that, our place in the universe and because the Bible really is written, like Claudia said, with a particular people group in mind, a particular at a particular point in time, and a particular geography, in fact. And so it leaves out the experiences of a lot of individuals who lived on Earth during that time. And so I wonder a lot about God's revelation to people in other places. And as Claudia expressed earlier, when we look at these other origin stories and things like that, are those also parts of God's revelation as well in other areas? It could be. And then also, as we're talking about just the bigger scope of not just our Earth, but our place in our galaxy and in our universe, those questions are things that, I don't know if we'll ever be able to get an answer to or an answer from strictly from the Bible, because it like Claudia was saying, these are things that the Bible's never meant to see or expound upon. And so for us, I think that it's important for us to continue to foster scientific exploration, because those are questions that we aren't going to be able to answer from a theological perspective. So.
Okay.
Yeah. And I guess just to that too, the thing that I've just been thinking is just that very first verse in Scripture, in the beginning, God.
Right.
And that's one thing that has always kind of stuck with me, because let me say it like this. Like one of the major questions when we study literature is, who is the narrator? Right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when you say that line, in the beginning, God, you in essence have a narrator who is saying that he has some kind of proof or evidence or knowledge that this particular event that he's about to expound upon happened because of God.
Mm-hmm.
What's interesting is that there is no backstory to the main character of this event, which is God himself.
Right.
And so that's always the question that I have, is that, okay, in the beginning, God did X, but what was God's beginning if God has a beginning?
Yeah.
So that's one thing that has always kind of stuck out to me. And, just to Courtney's point, that I think we just really can't genuinely answer. And I think that's kind of when faith kind of comes back in and says, okay, I don't know when God began, but I do know that there is a potential that something began after him. Like he started something. Yeah. And so,
no, I think that's a very good point that you just made. I think one of the things that we're clear on is all of our questions will not be answered, no matter what side of the spectrum we take, whether we're on a creationism side or we're on naturalistic evolution side. Richard Dawkins says, man, I believe this, but I can't prove it. So everyone is exercising faith somewhere. And if we were to answer everything with an ironclad answer, there would be no need for faith. And so we're really being honest to say, as much as we're wrestling with this and we're providing best answers, none of this is to be a shut door case for this particular worldview. Yeah. But as we say this, I think if we can recap, we're saying we're establishing that based on even some science lends itself to an intelligent designer, and we are ascribing here that our intelligent designer is the God of the Bible. It is the one who is mentioned in Genesis as creating the heavens and the earth, and that it still doesn't answer all of our scientific questions because it wasn't meant to be a science textbook. Now, one of the things that I want to be clear on is there may be some people who believe in intelligent design, believe in a creator with similar characteristics to the one mentioned in Genesis. And you alluded to this earlier, Claudia. Tell me, kind of share with me, why is this narrative, the Judeo-Christian narrative, because it's not just a Christian narrative, it's a Judeo-Christian narrative. Why is that one that you hold to as opposed to some of the others that you might have read in literature or heard about through culture and other, why is this the one that you hold on to?
To be totally honest, this is the one that I hold true to, just because within the Bible it says that the Holy Scriptures are the inspired Word of God. And so that text alone is really what gets me to elevate the narratives of the Bible over other narratives that I have read. And the more I study literary theory, the more I study textual criticism, I understand that there's this process when you think about why a text is authoritative. Like, why is one text considered to be greater than another text? When editors want to edit a text for revision, are they going to pick the first edition of that text, or are they going to pick the 12th edition of that text? With the differences between that, why is that text chosen, yada, yada, yada. And there are always political and social reasons for why people choose one text over another. And so just based on my own schooling, it would be foolish of me to say that I choose the Bible for purely spiritual reasons. Because it's just, I don't know, it just doesn't, I don't know, I guess like my knowledge, and this could be a problem for some, but my knowledge just does not allow me to do that. And so I recognize the social and political and cultural role that the biblical text, through its variety of revisions and translations and its influence throughout the entire world, I recognize that social, political, and cultural influence. And because of that, I choose the Bible. Because no other text has been distributed and translated and revised the way that the Bible has. For whatever social, political reason, that is still, the fact of the matter.
Okay. Courtney, how about you answer that question as well? Why do you choose this narrative over other creation narratives? If we establish intelligent design, we establish that there is a creator, and we're even saying this creator is an active creator. Why do you choose this narrative over others, Courtney?
So you're right. There are lots of different creation narratives. You know, Islam has a creation narrative that's very similar. Even Hinduism has some elements that are similar to what we see in our creation story. So yeah, I think that there are a variety that someone could choose from, but for me it is, and this isn't something that I can impose upon anybody or prove to anybody or make anyone else share this perspective, but for me it is a spiritual kind of difference. In my life personally, I feel that Jesus has had an effect on me that when I've studied other religions was only able to be explained by a savior and my experience with Christianity. And so for me, my personal experience with Christ has led me to believe that the Christian experience and that narrative that we see as revealed through the Bible is the one that I choose for my personal life. Now, if someone said, well, can you prove that from a scientific basis? I can't. And I just have to be honest about that because, you know, there are just some things that you do have to take on faith. And this is one of those things that I've chosen for my personal life that I think is my account of faith.
Right. So as I hear it from you, Claudia, you've examined other texts, and as a literary man, I'm trying to think as a critic of literature, as you look at it, this is one that has been widely distributed, one that has affected you personally, and has almost stood the test of criticism also from others. And then Courtney, just to listen to you, it's personal, where you're almost working backwards. You accept the Jesus of the Bible and his role in your life and his effect in your life, and so working backwards from that, he is, he's the one that is, his foundation is based on that Genesis creation narrative. So you accept Jesus as Savior. So you accept him as also part of that creation narrative. Is that correct?
Right.
All right. Well, in the last few minutes that we have here, any thoughts you want to share with anyone, as there may be someone who is watching this even in archive, as we put it up on our site, as we put it on our YouTube channel, and they may be wrestling with creation and Christianity and stuff. What would be something you would leave to encourage them in their quest, in their questioning? What is some words of just encouragement you would leave for someone who is trying to grapple with this, who maybe even their faith background may not be Christianity, so this is new to them? What would you say to them in closing? I'll kind of let y'all decide who goes first.
Okay, well, I guess I would say I choose to believe in a creation, in the Judeo-Christian biblical creation narrative, because I think that there is power to knowing that your life has purpose.
Okay.
So I think that when you subscribe to a narrative like the Big Bang, where scientific particles and different things like that literally just called a bunch of stuff into being, and then you ultimately formed from that, I think that it does not give your life the same kind of meaning that knowing that there is an all-knowing, all-powerful God who is greater than you, he's bigger than you, he's bigger than the universe because he created the universe.
Right.
And he saw fit to say, I am going to form you. And so in forming you, he then also designed a purpose, a life goal, a reason for your existence. And so I think that knowing that in the back of my mind just gives my life so much more meaning and so much more power. And I have way more encouragement, spiritual encouragement, social encouragement, political encouragement to be involved in my community and to not give up on life when life gets hard. You know, I mean, sometimes we deal with so many different things and, you know, we become depressed and we become downtrodden. And I just feel like, you know, if I didn't believe that I was truly created by God, then when those moments of depression, when those moments of heartache come, I genuinely would have no reason to live. But because I know that God created me for a purpose, I can say, you know what? God created me for something that is bigger than myself. And so I'm willing to stay in relationship with him, draw closer to him so that I can come to a better understanding of how he would like me to live out the design that he intended in his mind.
Wow. Yeah, that's good. I like that. Thank you. Thank you. How about you, Courtney? What would you say to someone wrestling with this question of origin?
Well, one thing I would say is I think it's a recap of one of the things that we mentioned before, that I would want that person to understand, number one, that you don't have to feel like you have to choose one or the other, where you have to either be true to science or true to a faith. So that's like, number one, I think you have to start from that starting point, knowing that there's not only these two dichotomous options. The second thing I think is also being comfortable in doubt and being comfortable with not knowing, because no matter where you land, eventually you will come to a point that you'll be at peace, but you have to be at peace with the fact that there are things that you just will not know, and that is okay. Because I think that we get ourselves into trouble and we find ourselves being getting into these conflicts and in disingenuous conversations with others when we feel that there's only one way to look at something and everything must fit into this box and it all must be explained by this way, and and everything that I have a question about will be answered and I will find the answer by this one thing, and it will happen, and I will have no other questions. And I think that that's unrealistic. We're always going to have some kind of questions about something. And then lastly, I would just say that you shouldn't be afraid of that uncertainty or afraid of that not knowing. I think we should not be afraid also to examine the hard truths, because, you know, sometimes people who are people of faith are very afraid to learn about things that are outside of that faith because they might be afraid that their faith will be shaken. But I think that the best way to have a solid foundation on something is to question it, because if you don't challenge those doubts, then those questions will continue to not only remain unanswered, but then you'll always wonder, is this thing something that is a real solid foundation at all? Or am I afraid that if I open this door, the wind will blow on it and collapse the entire thing? And so if that's the case, if you feel like your faith is that fragile, then really, is it really faith at all? And so I think that no matter if you are a person who has never had a faith, or if you're a person who has always been faithful to one particular perspective, I think you owe it to yourself to look at other perspectives. And you might come back to that same conclusion that you had before, but be open to exploring those other things and answering them genuinely.
Yeah.
No, that's great. Both of you just summed that up so well. For those who are watching, we really appreciate you taking the time. And if you may be watching this by in archive, thank you for watching this. This is a dialogue that we want to have. Again, the website is goodgod4real.com. Go there. We'll be posting more videos this week. We'll be posting a video tomorrow with some questions that we'll pull together from people here in Memphis, and the questions they had about God, the questions they had for God. We'll be answering those questions Saturday at 2 live locations, 1224 Chelsea in Memphis and 8505 Trinity. You'll find it on our website. And then next week, Tuesday at 7 again, we'll be having another Google Hangout. We'll have some more guests discussing the question that we are posting tomorrow. So thank you for watching. Please like the Facebook and the Twitter so that you can be in on the discussion. And I want to thank our our guests tonight, Ms. Claudia Allen and Ms. Courtney Ray. Thank you both for spending this time with us. Thank you both for sharing, and we look forward to more dialogue.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Sorry you couldn't see me this whole time. And my hair looks cute, too. You didn't get to see it.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Next time. Well, thank you both, ladies. May you have a good night, and everyone have a good night, everyone.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.